She was now part of history, and a copy of the melody of a complex instrumental trio. Her skin, like exquisite marble, recreated a unique look of whiteness that surpassed even the freshest snow. She should forge ahead. That curse would serve as her sword and shield until things returned to normal. The girl, to earn extra money, is passionately engaged in creating comic books. If she had a choice, she wouldn't want her life to be cut short by sleep deprivation. She's Amy Melvin, and this is the tale and transformation of an unsleeping Depasna girl into a little miss. If the events do not develop according to the rules of the story, she may lose her mind and go crazy. But there, for the first time, a handsome, fair-haired butler appeared and greeted her. Personal butler Dean, dedicated to his service and concerned for his mistress's welfare, asked about whether she had slept well last night. Then there's the best-dreaded brother, Alan Melvin, who was the only Sam twin. He was born into the world to be her knight, so he pledges to keep her safe. And finally Ash, he is an incredibly strong warrior. Now she didn't understand how she could live with them under the same roof. Zhang Qinglin sat at her desk and continued to draw a comic book. She was a middle school student and a freelance comic book artist. Suddenly, her assistant knocked on her door and asked if she could bring her medicine. The artist asked the assistant to leave it on the table, as she was almost done, and thanked her for it. The assistant did not realize that the master was not afraid of sudden death due to loss of strength, because she had been painting continuously for more than 20 hours. Suddenly, Qinlin received a notification on her phone. She said that she hadn't noticed that so much time had already passed. She suggested her assistant go take a nap first. She immediately replied that it was the master who should rest more. She was afraid that one day she would lose her legs if she did not stop torturing her body. Qinling said that Qinling had always taken great care of her, even though she was younger, and then added that her immune system was actually weak from birth. But suddenly, in just a few seconds, the girl's outer peace was disturbed when she suddenly started a coughing fit and drops of blood started to protrude on her lips. The assistant immediately ran up to her and asked her to get ready and hurry up to take her pills, and then they would go to the hospital. She kept asking if Master could hear her. Qinling only slowly closed her eyes and completely fell into darkness. She fell unconscious. Duke Melvin's palace. Capel Empire. When she first woke up, she felt slightly sick and disconnected from the world. She didn't understand who she was, where she was, or why. She wondered what had happened. Suddenly, her butler Dean greeted her and asked if she was feeling sick or what. Amy, unable to cope with the unexpected moment, decided to express her worry and fear. Using her natural instincts, she decided to kick him and screamed at him not to come any closer to her. She must be missing something. It looks like she has become the villain of her own comic book, or rather the little girl in a family of rich people. This story is created by her hands and tells the story of the meeting between the Deus Ex Machina of the Moonflower Kingdom and Prince Capel. Any stories without antagonists are very boring and dry, because for every good there must always be evil. The main villain, Amy Melvin, is the absolute opposite of the protagonist, has a deceptive appearance and high status in social circles because of her father, the Duke. She is ready to go to any dastardly deed for the sake of achieving the goal, even if the mind and body are broken and hands are stained with sin, nothing will stop her. Eccentric and cruel, beautiful and dangerous, once all of this whippersnapper's affairs are revealed, she will go insane and commit suicide, ending the story. Amy Melvin is exactly like that, but Qinlin, who becomes Amy's heroine, is not like that. She asks for help, because what's the point of making her a character like that? She can't think of a better way to act. The little girl asked about who he was, to which the butler replied that he was her humble servant, Dean. He asked her why she would ask such questions when she already knew. Amy, realizing her unfortunate reaction and wanting to ease the tension of the moment, sincerely apologized. She made an effort to express her sincerity, adding that she was actually seeing this man for the first time. Dean was so stunned by what had happened that his reaction was like being petrified, and he simply lost his balance and fell. The sudden event left him in a state of shock and incomprehension, causing him to freeze in place and only then realize what had happened. In her touching appeal to him, she begged him with one single request, not to faint, the kind of thing that would make even a bird frightened. The butler asked permission to start by combing her hair and washing her. Amy agreed, as long as he didn't cry. Then Mr. Dean finally got himself together. In the original comic book version, he was Amy's personal butler, and when the character's own work began to take care of her, she began to have a very strange feeling of unease. Although he managed to fool him, but there was a whole series of challenges ahead. The study on the first floor of the Duke of Melvin's mansion. Dean asked Alan to try and stay calm afterward. He said that Amy apparently has amnesia, and all she had in her head was anxiety. Some people who seem to be thick-skinned are actually panicky. She decided to keep silent. Meanwhile, the young master's memory download continued. The smooth environment was suddenly disrupted when he jumped up abruptly, creating a sudden surge of energy in space. The little girl's reaction was equally sudden, for such an unexpected movement made her flinch, expressing her surprise and slight frightened state. The young gentleman, feeling a rush of tenderness and joy at meeting his sister, approached her resolutely, opening his arms in a desire to give her warmth and comfort. He asked her about the fact that she wouldn't leave him, even though she had amnesia. It was too much for her. She screamed so much that the bird quickly got earplugs after the first time. My brother cried, he apologized, and explained that she had been in a coma for a few days and woke up, and he got excited and couldn't help himself. The over-emotional reaction that was caused by the situation was unusually strong and unjustified in the opinion of others. Dean, feeling responsible for sharing information with his host, asked how they should share the information they had received. Babe didn't understand what it was about yet. Alan replied that it was no trouble to talk to him. One could not worry. For the most important thing was that Amy was all right. Her brother pecked and stroked her cheeks. They were sweetly pleased with each other. Suddenly, Amy shuddered. For a moment, she thought she had fallen under the spell of a very beautiful face. The little girl, suddenly sensing some degree of surprise or possible danger, brushed aside her brother's hand with a slight movement and stepped aside. She hid behind Dean and kept thinking that she had so far supposedly memory loss. It seems that her relationship with this cute boy is very good and close, with no idea how to act in response. She kept hiding, much to Dean and Alan's surprise. Amy didn't understand if they were going to see what happened. She didn't understand why looking at him made it seem like they were seeing each other for the first time. Alan was worried. It dawned on her. Alan Melvin, he is Amy's twin brother. At this point, he, who is a character in the original memoirs. She was sent away at her own 12th birthday feast. The celebration nearly turned tragic. She didn't realize what the devil was now, what strange things were going on. Conscience stabbed her right in the heart. Alan asked that she didn't remember him at all, her big brother. The little girl was at a loss for words at what was happening. She mentally asked for help, because she didn't even know what to say and didn't understand why she couldn't just run away. She turned around and started running, saying that she had other things to do, so she would be the first to leave. Free her legs and run. Sometimes a proper retreat isn't a shameful act at all, but an effective way to escape from problems. Dean looked at the way the mistress ran away and thought about that incredible speed. Well worth it, as for a young mistress. Alan turned to Dean and informed him that the master had already returned. The corridor on the first floor of Duke Melvin's mansion. All that could be heard down the corridor was the stomping of a little girl running. Amy kept wondering why she felt like she was in her own old-fashioned comic book, starring Mary Sue. There was no way she'd ever written such a cliched script in her life. Suddenly, she bumped into someone. He asked her to be more careful. The little girl apologized, for she didn't mean to at all. That man asked about whether she could be blamed, such a precious little princess baby. Amy didn't realize who else he was. The man asked about if she was all right, for she looked tired. Gorgeous, delightful. He was painted completely differently from the others. She had never seen or portrayed this character before. It was a premium class. Amy turned to him and asked who he was, just needing to say the name. He touched her forehead. She didn't realize what the strange, murderous aura was. Duke turned to Kano. He was filled with the urge to smash everything around him. The maid came in. Amy didn't understand where the new face was coming from, where they were coming from. He asked her to get Dean and Alan for him because he wanted to ask them something. Everyone was already there. It was wonderful. Then the Duke decided to get to the point. He asked them to explain why his own daughter didn't recognize him and what had happened during his absence. Amy sat fidgeting behind that man and didn't understand the reason why the situation had become so tense. There was an ominous aura wafting from that man behind her. She realized that the grown man had called her a daughter and that the gentleman was her father. She glanced at him discreetly. Amy was shocked that he was so young, it was unbelievable. A dumbass who didn't have time to introduce this character into the manuscripts. Alan exhaled. Capel, the royal lineage. Amy had suddenly disappeared from the estate a few days ago. She had been unconscious by the time they found her, and had only woken up a couple hours ago. Dean and his brother continued to stare at the young mistress. She didn't realize what they were staring at. She had barely entered her new life and didn't know a thing. The young master continued to stand and fidget nervously. His father continued to stare at him intently. Although the gentlemen present were silent, an awkward atmosphere hung in the air. Amy only felt pressured and mentally kept asking for help. She really wanted someone to get her out of this nightmare. Her condition was noticed by Kano. The servant thought the mistress was too nice. She held out her hands to her. She didn't understand how such stupid dorks didn't realize that it was not okay to say such things in the presence of a little lady. She took her in her arms and apologized, then explained that my lady needed rest and they could consult alone for now. Kano thought the little girl must have been very upset. Duke Fanir asked what the matter was for and asked that she bring his little girl back. Kano asked him to concentrate on his business and discussions. Kano's maid is her goddess. Kano announced that they would be the first to leave, smiled a final victorious smile, and the doors closed. All the men present, experiencing a pleasant feeling of ease and joy in dealing with the little princess, bade her farewell in an atmosphere of merriment. As soon as the doors closed, there was a momentary indifference and gloom. Fanir asked if, in his absence, Capel had really decided to break the law by resorting to kidnapping. Dean explained that it would have been fine if that party had acted decisively, but unfortunately the situation was exactly the opposite. Alan was in the middle of his thoughts. The young master said that this time the lady had not been kidnapped by the royal family, but had disappeared without a trace in broad daylight, and he was afraid that that person was probably involved. The Duke said that he would take Amy to the palace for a couple of days because he wanted them to talk to him in private. Fanir thought that this is a misfortune because Amy is still alive, but then who is the child who died instead of her? And the image of Chin Lin appeared. Amy thanked the maid for getting her out of there. Kano asked her to call her by her first name. The little girl noticed a small wing by the maid's hair. She wanted to touch it very badly. So she did. Kano immediately made it known that her ears were not to be touched. She apologized for that and explained that she thought it was just a piece of jewelry on her head. But just then she realized it was a body part. Kano explained that she's not human, so they're different. While it's expected that there are other races in a different world, it's amazing to what extent. It seems she finally realized one thing. Instead of passively waiting, it's better to take the initiative herself. It's time to explore the new world. Capel, Market Street, District 2. Amy still can't believe the scenes she's been drawing have now come to life, becoming a reality. Just like taking a trip abroad. Except she didn't understand why the butler was with them either. A while ago. Amy approached her brother. Alan asked if she wanted to go for a walk. He explained that of course he could, but he couldn't leave his place yet, and Kano and Dean had left the estate for a while, and his brother was busy. Suddenly, Dean showed up and said it wasn't true, and asked if they were looking for him. He promised to give the young mistress an unforgettable traveling experience. Somehow, and suddenly the urge to go outside was gone. Dean asked about the fact that it was the first time Amy had approached him by herself. The little girl didn't understand what was wrong with them. Gloomy, upset Alan, who had been persuaded, said that he was obliged to keep a very close eye on her, and if the little sister was dissatisfied or upset, he could consider his days numbered. Dean understood. He asked permission to take the lady out on a date and show her all the joys of shopping. End flashback. Dean handed the little lady a scone and asked if she would try it. The little lady thanked him. She started to eat and kept thinking that Mr. Dean is quite nice and cute. She couldn't match his whipping enthusiasm. Dean asked the lady to wait for him for a while, because a new dessert stall had recently opened up in the sleepy house. He wanted to get one for her. He was going to eat it, or he was just going to eat it. He told her not to go anywhere because he's going to fly off and come back. Amy said he was too windy. Although the world is beautiful enough, the atmosphere is cozy, cultural differences aside, very much like modern times. She continued eating her scone as she heard a scream. Amy didn't know what had happened, though she was startled, but continued to savor it. The lady who screamed reported a brash, inconsiderate commoner. The guy apologized to her, to which the lady reported that he had soiled her dress. The guy fell to his knees and kept apologizing. The lady begged him to let her go. In a moment of deep remorse and inner anguish, he, with a heavy heart and tears in his eyes, relentlessly resorted to begging for forgiveness out of a sincere desire to escape the imminent threat of death. Amy, who was watching this picture, and all thought that the guy was strange, because he reacted as if the noble lady was intimidating him. Although in fact he was the one who grabbed her dresses, maybe he was just trying to ask for compensation. Suddenly, the guy had grabbed Amy's dresses and was now begging for mercy. She didn't realize that he wasn't mistakenly eating around a bunch of adults, so why did she suddenly decide to turn to her for help? Maybe because she was dressed so plainly. After all, she didn't look much like an aristocrat. She wondered if that man was headed for her. The lady kept saying that it was outrageous, but she noticed that next to this commoner, it was her. It was curious to her. She wondered if she was the fool of the Duke's family. The lady came up to Amy and said that this shabby rags suited her very well. Amy didn't understand where the lousy outfit was coming from, and then replied that anything was better than her cabbage outfit. The lady kept trying to digest this information. She informed her that it was Mrs. Cabbage and called her a rude, tasteless idiot. Amy asked if she had something urgent or not. Meanwhile, the guy decided to take off in a huff. The lady kept saying that after what happened, Amy had become a puppet who could only watch in a daze, and then asked why she should not challenge her, or she would just keep quiet like a stray dog again. Amy asked what family she was from for too many words. She was actually wondering who she reminded her of that mean girl. Bainey asked what she meant, and then said that whoever she was a rising star of society, the dreaded daughter of Viscount Bailed. She only said it once and she won't say it again. We don't need more. As soon as she began to speak, Amy noted that her voice was very loud. The basic course is the socialite. In this world, the position in society from high to low is as follows. First Duke, then Marquis, followed by Earl, then Viscount. Well, and the lowest is Baron. The status of Duke Melvin is naturally much higher than that of Viscount. Amy was from the Duke's family. The little girl didn't understand what Bainey was so proud of, just an evil little girl. Amy sighed and kept thinking that it didn't matter all that much, just an ignorant asshole trying to scare her. She, determined and eager to share her perception, set about demonstrating to Bainey what real villains looked like. Duke Melvin's office. Alan kept sitting there wondering how Amy was doing. Before she lost her memory, it was as if she was empty inside, a fool, letting others manipulate her like a puppet. Now she is more energetic, but he continues to worry out of habit, still unable to stop worrying. Alan decided to calm his anxiety and get back to his public service, or whatever it was, to business. Bainey asked what the lady had said, and added that she shouldn't think that such a nonchalant look would frighten her. Amy turned to Miss Bailed and said that she thought she was trying to scare her, and then added that her position was much higher. Her family's status was no comparison to who she was and who Miss was. She put her hand on her shoulder and continued to press on with the question of whether Miss was prepared to face the consequences for such disrespect. This sudden and intense exposure to information caused Miss Bailed not only extreme surprise, but also some degree of shock. Bainey pushed Miss away with words of forgiveness and a request that she not come near her again. She promised never to hurt Amy again. The little mistress didn't even move. Bainey ran off with words about Amy not forgetting her name. Amy only watched Miss Bailed run away and noticed how she turned as red as a boiling kettle. She didn't realize that she had just run away, leaving her in such a stupid position, or what. This all happening was watched closely and with interest by Ash. He was staring into the events with his gaze, penetrating into the essence of what was happening like an observer, noticing the subtle nuances and details. Ash thought that luckily that kid wasn't evil, but he didn't understand where Dean was and why he wasn't accompanying Miss. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed the butler and that kid. The boy recanted that he'd done everything his master, Dean, had asked him to do to provoke a conflict between the two young ladies, but it hadn't worked out. Dean replied that nothing. He'd done a good job, but now things were a little more complicated, because little Amy wouldn't be as obedient as before. The butler remarked that he was discovered by the little loyal knight, and then asked that he couldn't kill him anyway, could he? As long as Amy Melvin is alive, as long as she's breathing, there's absolutely nothing Ash can do until her life is cut short. The guy who started the ruckus said he'd better go. Dean asked him to go, because if he didn't leave right away, he wouldn't be able to later. Ash wanted to attack Dean, but his shield went off. The butler asked him if he was the rumored guard dog of the Melvin family, or false knight, and then asked him which name Ash liked better. Ash told him to shut up, because he was a mutt of the Imperial Capel family, and it was obvious that he had no good intentions, so Dean should refrain from doing anything stupid. The butler said that he thought he would praise him, and then offered to talk about life next time, because Miss was probably waiting for his return. Amy stood waiting for Dean. She didn't understand why he was still there. Suddenly Dean appeared and apologized for keeping her waiting. Mistress asked him why he hadn't come for so long, where the bread had gone, and if he hadn't gone for sweets. She noticed something and asked him to duck a little. He did so. She ran her hands over his face, moved his hair a little, and wondered where the wound had come from. Meanwhile, while attention was focused on what was happening, and the cause of the injury was in the shadows, standing nearby behind the wall, Dean explained that he'd met a puppy on the way that had tried to take his food away from him, and then took her hand and kissed it, asking her how she was worried about him, and how she could be so nice. Amy actually appeared shocked. Her face reflected not only outward uncertainty, but also an inner turbulence of emotion. The butler stroked her cheek with words to the effect that it was the safety of the lady's unlovely face that was paramount. He looked in Ash's direction. Ash was just watching this picture with thoughts of him letting her go. Total resentment. Dean only thought, what a funny little guy. The butler informed then it was getting late and they should get back, for tomorrow was an important schedule. Bainey ran down the narrow street, thinking how embarrassing it was that it was obviously the other side of Amy. She remembered the image of the young mistress, and how could she not agree that she was very beautiful? She didn't know what to do next with the task her father had given her, if this was the way things were going. Something rustled in the dark alley. Bainey was startled when she saw the silhouette. Viscount Bailed Racken Bailed asked what the servants wanted to say, that his daughter, after meeting with Miss Melvin, had disappeared or what. Bainey, his little girl, she's a child his father is so very proud of, she's given him a chance to get close to Amy in no time. He decided to think when he had better settle accounts with the Melvins. Late at night, Amy went out for some fresh air and wondered who was in charge of her comic book now. She doesn't know what's going on in that world at this point. She looked down and wondered if she could get back up if she jumped off the 3rd floor. Mistress didn't know if she should try because she didn't belong there, so she climbed to the balcony. Suddenly, Alan appeared. He grabbed her and told her that it was dangerous and she had to come down immediately. Sitting together on the floor and holding hands, Amy asked her brother if he was angry with her. He replied briefly that he was, because what could have been if he had been late? Amy apologized and promised that she wouldn't do such dangerous things again, so he should continue to hold her with his trembling hands. She's not someone he really cares about. Day 2. Dean opened the curtains in the young mistress's room and informed her that it was time for her to get up, for she had to go to the palace to meet His Majesty. Sleepy M still didn't fully understand the whole situation at first. Dean asked about the little gentleman. Didn't he tell her that yesterday? It only took a second to move her from the bed to the mirror. His skills really are amazing. Flashback to when Alan stopped Amy. He tried to stop her from jumping off the balcony last night and was probably too scared and forgot to tell. Dean informed her that she would have a bodyguard her age assigned to her, so she didn't have to worry. He was already waiting for her outside the door, so she should get ready. Amy walked out of the room and met up with Ash. She wondered how such a child and is a guard of the Lord. Ash greeted the young mistress, introducing himself. She asked him to stand up. This character was not in her comic book. Ash listened to her and obeyed. As soon as she saw his eyes, she was amazed at his heterochromia. Thank goodness he's so handsome. Suddenly she felt that unkind look on her. Turning around, she looked out the window and saw that bird there looking right at her. At the same time, in another country, Huayue, High Management Bureau, Chen Qiuyi was standing with a pair of scissors and cut off her hair. She thought it was very pretty, and she was really good at it. Even if she cut her hair, she would still be a beauty. She was asked if she had packed her luggage because the boat had arrived in Capel. Qiuyi replied that she had and was ready to leave at any time. She was reminded that she was not going there to play games. She must remember her mission. Chen Chu asked not to worry, as she can be relied on. She needs to catch the monsters that escaped to the neighboring countries. Chen sat and thought that the goal of this mission was Xunyao. She wondered if similar mutants were found in other countries. It was a curious thing. The boatman turned to the girl and ordered her to descend quickly as it was dangerous. He didn't understand how she had gotten up there. The little girl apologized. The boatman said they were there. The country the whole world is talking about is Capel. Capel, a country famous throughout the world for the power of Mura. The locals believe in light and freedom, but the source of this belief has a violent past. 500 years ago, through the efforts of the Capel family, the gods Yumeng and Shanyuedong overthrew a ruling dynasty that was mired in fraud and tyranny. After many generations, the current ruler of this country is Reggio Capel. Sitting in the carriage, Amy kept thinking about the fact that they know about this country only in general terms. But once there is a realization that everything is much more complicated. Her father couldn't wait to share his joy with his daughter, and with excitement in his voice he turned to her, stating that here they had finally arrived at their destination. Here it was, the ruling family of Capel. Little Amy is a little nervous. Viscount Bailed appeared, who kept asking Malwyn as soon as they arrived for them to bring her back, as they had taken his precious daughter. The guards asked the Viscount to calm down. Mr. Bailed kept saying that his daughter disappeared after meeting Amy. He kept saying that it was her fault, and all because the young mistress hates her. This was all being watched by Ash, who was just thinking if their whole family was equally brainless or what. Mr. Bailed kept saying that he wanted their whole family to pay for this and started to invoke magic, the power of Mura. He was told to stop. The Duke made a defense in time and started saying that kind of thing in front of the palace itself, quite ingenious. It was only a pity that he had messed with the wrong person. Mr. Bailed was shocked by the appearance. Fanir applied magic on Mr. Baeld's hand, which he used for magic. The Duke ordered the guards to take him away. Meanwhile, Ash was helping Amy to come to her senses. She was still trying to realize that the man wanted to attack her, and that it was the power of the Mura that was so powerful, how she wanted to go home to her mom. The guards began to lead the Lord away. Racken thought it went just fine. They would see each other next time. They would just have to wait. In the royal reception hall, Lord Reggio Capel, in full accordance with his status, stood by the table, tapping rhythmically on its surface. At the same time, Fenrir, looking like a true paragon of elegance, was enjoying tea while seating himself comfortably. Meanwhile, little Amy, despite her inner tension, diligently maintained her outward composition, not allowing any doubt to show on her face. Reggio, beginning his remarks, remarked that it was the first time the Duke had appeared to them with his daughter, implying that she would now be a member of their circle. He then turned to the little girl, asking her if he could address her by the name Amy, symbolizing some new stage in their relationship. Feeling her father's touch on her sleeve, Amy moved closer to him, showing her affection and loyalty. This gesture reflected not only her respect for her father, but also her willingness to support him in any circumstance. At this time, the ruler had already begun to use his magical abilities, laying questions on her and awaiting answers. Amy, though she could feel the tension in the air, tried to remain calm and answer the questions posed with dignity, showing her confidence and determination. The little girl felt a tremendous pressure. For some reason, raising her eyes to him and answering would be more frightening than death. But not answering the king was not allowed, was it? She didn't know what to do. The Duke covered his daughter's eyes and explained that she was a lady and asked the king not to be like that. The little girl happily hugged her father's arm. Reggio asked if the young lady would accept his sincere apology, for he was sorry. The king asked if she would forgive him or if the little girl wanted to snuggle against his broad chest. Fenrir turned to Reggio and gave him a second to move away from his daughter. The door to the waiting room. Amy kept thinking how frivolous this was. Her character and Reggio are too different. Her gentle, handsome. She didn't understand why he turned into a smiling tiger. No need to ruin her character. Ash asked all the while she was wondering what was next. He asked her if she was okay. Amy thought he wouldn't understand the loneliness of an author from another world. Amy replied that nothing was wrong and suggested he take a walk. In the gloomy interior of the king's study, the Lord suggested that there was a transmigration of souls, or the transmigration of the soul into a new, free body. This phenomenon, he said, could be compared to the return of the spirit to Amy's child, who remains the same despite the change. Amy, present in the study, listened attentively to the king's words. After he expressed his thoughts, she turned to Ash, wanting to know if he had heard the same things she had. Ash, answering Amy's question, explained that because of the powerful soundproofing inside the palace, he couldn't make out what was being said outside the walls of the study. His answer confirmed that no sound vibrations reached his ears. Influenced by the king's words, and then Ash's response, Amy began to wonder if she had imagined the sounds. She wondered what had happened, and began to doubt the veracity of her perceptions. But suddenly she heard them talking again, so it wasn't imagined. Fenrir informed her that the king knew that he had not brought her to him to confirm her identity. The king asked what it was about. Liliana's prophecy, only one child is destined to survive. He could bring little Amy. That would mean his child would have to be fiercer than the others. Fenrir asked Reggio if he believed this statement. Reggio replied that the Duke was a ruthless man, to which Fenrir asked him not to interrupt, and then proceeded to say that he was looking for a way to break the curse, and then asked about what the king was doing. The ruler asked the Duke what he thought, that he thought he had done something to that girl, or what. Reggio asked to be sure. It's a fake with low survivability. She only cares about him, the Duke. The only survivor will be his child, not Amy Melvin. As she strolled down the corridor, she felt a little lost, not quite grasping the meaning of the conversation going on around her. Compared to the content of the comic book, where every frame was overflowing with information and details, the everyday reality seemed too simple and uninformative. Amy, turning to Ash, suddenly froze as if mesmerized by the instantaneous event that happened before her eyes, making her forget the current situation for a moment. Meeting Shunyao's gaze as he watched them through the window, Ash realized that something was wrong and instantly felt a surge of anxiety. In the comic book, the scene with the appearance of the bird occurred much later than it did in real life. The young mistress, puzzled as to how the bird ended up where she saw it, had a hard time understanding how this unexpected detail fit into the overall course of events. She felt that there was something deeper and more mysterious behind this strange encounter. The bird stared at Amy for a long moment, one moment, and the window cracked and burst open. When Ash sensed the approaching threat, he reacted instantly, shielding Amy with his body, trying to create a shield for her from the potential danger. The young lady's face turned to the knight with an expression of confusion and concern as she turned to him to ask for help, sincerely hoping for his protection and support in this difficult moment. The ringing of a shattered emerald bouncing off the floor was like a musical note in the dark symphony filling the room. Raising his eyes, Ash turned to Miss Amy, ready to act on the circumstances and ensure her safety. In that instant, seeming like an eternity, the young lady continued to fall downward, plunging deeper into the darkness of the unknown, coming face to face with the unknown and danger, force, as if drowning in a black sea that makes people gasp for breath. There were many mysteries left, the answers to which were never found, but none of that mattered anymore. She wondered if she would just die or go back to her desk. It wasn't so bad to just pick up and disappear like that. If she wasn't going to be rescued, then she was fine as it was. She should die without question. The image of Amy, who had died earlier, came to her. She said that she would be watching over her anyway, guarding her. Qinling is her little Amy. Amy didn't understand what she was talking about, who she was. She looks exactly like the villain she drew, but the little girl wants to sleep so badly that she can't think of anything else. All this time, Bainey has been trying to wake Miss Melvin. She didn't understand why she wouldn't wake up. Waking her up didn't seem to help. In all four directions, north, south, west, and east, Chen continued her thorough search, never faltering for a moment. Soon she reached her goal, a sign of which was the paper crane's slight hovering in the air. Watching what was happening, she was inwardly confused, not realizing the reason why all those people were gathered here in the first place. As Amy slowly opened her eyes and stared at Shunyao's figure, a mixture of fear and uncertainty unfolded in her soul. Bainey, who was sitting next to her, felt that all was finally lost, and had a premonition of a terrible upcoming event that could end tragically. As the bird frantically chased after the ball that was at the center of all events, everything waited for the one moment that would mark the explosion that would change the course of everything that was happening. Xunyao watched Amy. The little girl kept coming closer and closer and didn't understand what this abomination was. She turned to the monster and explained that her life was no less abominable anyway, so the easiest thing to do was to kill it. No thanks from Xunyao. Amy began to bind the monster with magical threads. Bainey was just thrilled that Miss Amy was so cool. The bird tried to struggle. Amy wished Chen good luck on her journey, but suddenly froze in anticipation. The sounds of approaching footsteps caught her attention, and she realized that someone was approaching, bringing with them a sense of freedom, that someone turned out to be Paper Crane, the one who was actively searching for the missing person. Suddenly, as if within an instant, everything came crashing down, the sudden occurrence disturbing the peace. Amy decided that this was not a good moment for such an incident. Xunyao had suddenly intervened, severing the thin threads that held everything together. Such an interference could have served as a catastrophic event, and Bainey was already beginning to worry that the situation might get out of control. For an extended period of time, the Paper Crane relentlessly reported the progress of the search, becoming more frequent and insistent in its alerts. Suddenly, Chen Chu-yi suggested that the case was of international significance and influence, emphasizing the seriousness of the situation and its importance at the world level. Xunyao, feeling the mounting pressure and responsibility, moved closer and closer to the young lady, trying to get more involved in the problem and help with the investigation. Appearing suddenly, Xunyao apologized for his lateness, thus showing his willingness to join the team and contribute to solving the situation. Amy opened her eyes and saw Chen fighting the monster. As soon as the young lady came to her senses, Chen said that it was not the best time to explain. She suggested that the first thing they should do was to find a way out of the spell, since the monster was still healing its wounds, it would be very difficult to win. Amy decided to keep calm and began to sort things out to reconstruct the chronology of events. In the last part of the story, the monster attacked her. Now the pink-haired child has flown to their rescue. However, so far it was impossible to escape or kill the monster. The realization came to her that Chun Chu-yi was there with them. Little Amy didn't understand how even the protagonist appeared too soon. Bainey turned to Amy and informed her that they shouldn't spread out and shake in terror just yet. That's right, they need to take control of the situation with their own knowledge of the comic book. Amy addressed Chen by her first and last name and informed her that she needed to aim for the eyes. Then she would be able to stop the beast for a bit. This surprised Chen a great deal. For a moment, Chen aimed at the monster's eyes, and in the next instant, the monster was already defeated, lying on the ground. However, Chen realized that it was too early to relax, because at any moment, the monster could rise up again and continue its attack. Therefore, she decided to leave caution and vigilance at the forefront of her mind to be ready for any possible threats. While Chen focused on the content of the story's narration, Amy felt the danger close to her, approaching her throat like sharp blades. The question of how Amy knew Chen's name came up, which caused some concern and curiosity. It was obvious to Chen that she herself was Amy's creation, like a child born from her artistic inspiration. She noticed that the bird seemed to have begun to rise from the ground, which could indicate that the danger was not yet completely gone and required further vigilance. Amy grabbed Chen, Bainey's hands and asked them to talk later, as the bird was weak in attacking, but hurting it through normal methods would not work, so they should pretend as if it was scared to die there to scurry away. Chen inquired about what exactly she knew. Amy reported that she was not originally fierce, blamed it on her obsession with the dark element Murat. Chen asked that it was then necessary to drive out a wedge with a wedge and use light spells. The trio of them had a huge problem, as none of them should have used this power, causing anxiety and risk to all involved. As the girls moved towards the exit, they found that the road further on was blocked, causing more difficulties and obstacles in their path. In this situation, Chen expressed her opinion, emphasizing the importance of continued punishment for those who commit unkind acts to prevent negative scenarios from recurring and to reinforce control over the situation. While the grandeur and beauty of the moment was impressive in its uniqueness, Amy's tactics based on the excessive expenditure of energy seemed inappropriate and ineffective for dealing with the current problems and challenges. In the next moment, the first candidate for the role of the Knight of Duke Melvin's mansion, Ash, appeared. The magical sense of self-preservation suddenly revitalized Amy, and her legs, weakened by the previous tense situation, regained strength. Ash informed that it was all quite troublesome. He cast spells on the monster. This made Chen incredibly excited. She thought he was an incredible kid who had Kappel's swordsmanship and magic. Ash approached Amy, showing genuine regret for his tardiness, and apologized to her. The gesture spoke of his desire to correct his mistake and regain her trust. As a sign of his remorse and desire to make amends, he handed her an emerald, symbolizing his value and respect for her. This was not only a conciliatory gesture, but also an attempt to return to her favor. Upon seeing the gift, Amy wondered what it was, which made her look at it with curiosity and anticipation. At the same time, Chen was holding his breath as he watched the scene, realizing that this moment would bring with it a certain risk of uncertainty and possible change. In response to Amy's question, Ash explained that there were some things that could only be fixed by herself. This answer spoke to his respect for Amy's independence and strength, as well as his faith in her ability to make decisions and act on her own. He walked over to her and tied a handkerchief around her neck and asked about hearing her voice. Such was one of her abilities. Chen didn't realize what the nonsense was. As soon as the handkerchief was tied, Amy heard a voice from the stone that kept calling for her mom. Chen was generally clueless about what was going on, but tried to pretend as if she understood everything. Ash only thought that even though it was beyond his control to grasp such a thing, the lady would definitely be able to. Ash made a warning maneuver and did not advise her to act recklessly if she wanted to find what she wanted. The voice from the stone kept asking for her mom's help. Amy asked to narrate what had happened, if she didn't mind. The emerald and the bird did not possess their original appearances. They had taken those forms under the influence of sinister foreign forces that they believed were responsible for everything that was happening. A few months ago, in Hua Yue, Wan Dao's mother had asked her daughter to wait a little while at the place, promising to return soon and begging her not to run away anywhere. The little girl agreed and stayed where she was, fulfilling her mother to the last word. Looking at the departing figure of her mother, she would never have thought that this momentary scene would be her last memory of her, and that her further life would take such a tragic turn. Suddenly, two strangers approached the girl, and one of them, the younger, announced that her family had made searches and now they must take her away with them. The older one explained that it was easier to just take the girl away rather than talk nonsense. Vanya asked who they were. The moment the black-clothed stranger raised his hand, Wan couldn't move a single part of her body. That was how she was kidnapped. Her heart clenched with horror, for no matter how much she screamed and cried, deep in her heart she realized that no one would be able to save her. Mom cried and did not understand where her daughter had disappeared to. A real cry of the soul. To the rescue of the unfortunate doomed souls arrived mysterious stranger. Who is he, enemy or friend? Upon learning of the disappearance, due to disturbing intrusive thoughts, she turned into a bird and rushed to search. The chick catcher, symbolizing a fearsome monster bird with a cat's tail, originated from the deep grief, despair, and sorrow felt by parents who lost their children in accidents. The bird, symbolizing that grief, did not recognize its baby girl in other girls who looked nothing like Wan Du. This caused parents who had lost their children to see them as reincarnations of their mother, giving them extreme tension and a desire to grab them quickly. The manifestations of the black side that the men in black robes were associated with were the result of their desire to make the beast bird stop its restless quest and influence it by administering a strange liquid. It was these events that were the source of the spawning of the black side, which grew out of deep human fears, grief, and a desire to control the unexplainable. The man who did all of this spoke of how she would now become even more powerful and beautiful, so she could tread and further search for her precious child. She was now their weapon. The voice coming from the emerald begged for forgiveness and explained that her mother sought only to be reunited with her with sincere intentions. Amy, expressing her thoughts, clarified that even though there had been a kidnapping, one shouldn't drag those who had nothing to do with them, including other people, into one's own problems. Wan responded by asserting that her mother would never do such a thing, emphasizing her belief in her mother's good intentions and denying the possibility that she could have been complicit in unholy acts. She thought puzzled, noticing that the attacks continued with renewed fury each time, and realizing that revealing the true identity of the Bloody Crow could have consequences. Amy, on the whole, didn't mind dying there, as she would probably be able to return to the real world after death. But what about the others? The bird began to rage. Amy's image turned to her and asked about her need for help. She decided to give her a clue, for she had two choices: cleanse this land or kill it. The young lady was approached by an unknown girl, causing her bewilderment and mixed feelings. The young lady could not understand who she was and why she was addressing her specifically, given her attractive appearance and charismatic demeanor. A voice emanating from Emerald suddenly sounded, informing her to stop such jokes and insults towards her mother. This unexpected turn of events left the young lady in a state of shock and bewilderment, as she suddenly felt a disruption of the usual order of things. As the young lady gazed into the girl's eyes, she noticed a flicker of her daughter's image, which made her wince in surprise. The moment brought additional excitement and confusion, as it brought back memories of family ties and responsibility in her mind. In response to the voice from the emerald, Amy's image appealed to Ash to spring into action. It was a clear call for him to take the initiative and become involved in resolving the situation at hand. giving the young lady support and assistance. Ash apologized to the young mistress for his tactlessness. He took her hand and reached forward. He asked her to look only forward. Amy's image began to recite a prayer. Enlightened Lord, I pray you heed my call. See the sorrow right before the eyes of the martyr, and with your loving heart, rest the suffering soul. On reflection, Chen felt some uncertainty. Was her action successful? She wondered if it was possible to induce the blinding light formation simply by combining a particle of pure muriate with dark muriate, and how effective a method it could be. At this time, Bainey continued to hold the soul shield, protecting the children who were also praying for salvation and longing to return home. Puzzled, the children couldn't understand why the ghosts wouldn't leave them, preferring to stay with them instead of being released. However, Chen noticed that the number of the children's spirits was becoming too great, and she realized that it was necessary to prevent them from making their way out. Chen came to Bainey's aid to hold back the barrier. Bainey asked her to hurry up and finish what she had started, for she could no longer hold out. There was no need for haste. Amy's image sent a cleansing message. Mom and daughter were finally reunited. Ash informed them that they now needed to guide them back to the seal. Everything came back. The children's souls were reunited with their bodies. Amy, with a heavy heart and excitement in her eyes, was finally able to formulate the question that had been simmering in her soul for a long time, and turned to Ash, expressing her hopes for a different outcome. "Is this the end now?" To which the latter nodded in an agreeing gesture. In an unexpected moment, the young mistress felt a sharp, prickling sensation piercing her, as if an icy coldness was penetrating every cell of her body. Seconds seemed to slow down, and the sudden cough that soared from her throat turned into a surprisingly heavy coughing attack, accompanied by an instant release of blood. This frightening moment created an atmosphere of anxiety and worry around her. Bainey asked the guard Ash to get Mistress out of there as soon as possible, for her body couldn't stand being there a little longer. Amy asked that they not return together. Bainey replied that she couldn't go. Since she was just like everyone else, she belonged there. She said that she was happy to spend leisure time with them and she was sorry they didn't become friends. So they said goodbye. Meanwhile, in the nobleman's prison, Mr. Bayld kept thinking that no one would have thought how the Viscount, devastated by the loss of his daughter, would suddenly go mad, transgress the law, and turn traitor to his homeland. What a skillful plan. He kept spinning the ball and talking about how, since Bainey had fallen victim to the chick catcher, there would be no suspicion of him now. Events were moving according to the script, and the trap was already set and easy to use. In that balloon was the image of his daughter Bainey. Under the guise of fear over the kidnapping of his favorite child, he attacked a girl of noble lineage, pinning a stone impregnated with the dark energy of Murat to attract the bird's attention. Then followed an even easier step. The conversation between the Duke and the ruler must necessarily affect that person, and for the duration of the conversation, the guards in the corridor leading to them will be called off. Just because of the foolish belief of aristocrats in their own security when being in their chambers, and then the weak princess is carried away by a strange monster. If suddenly she really turns out to be the curiosity they are looking for, there will be no limit to the happiness. But if not, he is left to grieve for his poor Bainey. Later they will meet in hell. As long as things go as planned, though, there's no cause for concern. Amy's image reported that even wrapped up tightly, it still eventually continues to suck the life force out of her. Ash thanked him for his assistance in any way. She simply asked him to take care of her sweet Amy. Very noisy. Someone was calling for Qinling's mentor. She didn't understand why there were several voices at the same time. She asked not to say that name because it wasn't hers. Someone called for Amy Melvin, and that caused the little girl to wake up abruptly. She noticed Kano and a bird beside her, asking her to wake up. She saw the young mistress in front of her. She screamed to call Dean, for the lady was awake. The little girl's ears popped. As it turned out, she had been unconscious for a week since the accident. Chen Qiuyi returned to her home country, and Ash decided to take a little vacation. Dean said that he had cleared the traces of the dark Murat element found in her body, so she should take a good rest, and then asked if anything else was bothering her or not. It was unusual for Amy to be trying to take care of her, almost to the point of incredible exhaustion. It turned out that warm and tender emotions that were intended originally not for her were very hard for her to accept. She wondered how Bainey was doing, completely lacking the courage to ask, even after getting there continuing to run away from reality like a worthless, feeble-minded fool. Alan, gripped by sudden excitement, involuntarily had his sister's name ripped out of him, shrill in the air. It was the moment when the emotions simmering in his soul found vent in a sudden exclamation. He asked her if she wouldn't mind going for a walk a little later when she was better, because her older cousin had recently returned, so they could meet up with him, and the three of them could chat. He asked her how she felt about his suggestions. The paper crane, which served as a communication, relayed a message from the mentor on how the errand was going, to which Chen replied that everything had already been accomplished. The target's soul was returning back to Hua Yue. She went on to say that in truth this time they almost got involved in a huge conspiracy and tangled intrigue, so she suggested to just send an ambassador. Simply put, they were set up. If the body of the behemoth that stalked Capel's citizens didn't show signs of third-party intervention, Chen asked what he thought would have happened. Now, in addition to the civilians, the following were involved: high-ranking aristocrats, nobles, and the imperial family itself. Naturally, the situation would easily escalate into a diplomatic conflict. Next, the matter would come under the control of the inspector's office. While passing by, she was caught by the prince. He apologized for it, to which she replied that it was fine. Chen looked at him and noticed his blonde hair, violet eyes, and Capel's crest in the form of a brooch. The prince, showing his care and attention, turned to her with a question full of concern, asking if she had hurt herself. Chen only realized that the Prince of Capel himself had met with her, just recently finished with a difficult task, and now there was a kind of fear and hesitation. Amy thought about that remembered cousin of sorts, the second Prince of Capel, and the main character of the comic book. The first person in history to successfully combine mechanical technology and various resources, having created many household items and military weapons, recognized as a scientific genius due to his charisma and attractive appearance, was called the inimitable talent of the second generation of the imperial family. The national treasure of the first generation is Finir Melvin, highly revered among the people and is the most suitable successor to the throne. At first, there was an interest inside to get to know the protagonist of the story and hear about his childhood. At this moment, however, it disappeared. Alan, full of earnest desire and perseverance, was relentless in his solicitations and pleading gaze, endeavoring to convey to her heart the importance of his wishes. A real charmer, suggestively presenting his proposals, he created an aura of irresistible charm around him. Amy, meeting his gaze and smile, felt his magnetism envelop her. She couldn't help but succumb to this attractive energy that surrounded him like an invisible magnet. Amy replied that they should just follow their arrangement. A tinge of confusion flickered on her face, like a dance of unresolved questions that swirled in her mind. Meanwhile, across from her, Alan, on the contrary, radiated excitement and joy. His smile sparkled brightly, emphasizing the positive emotions that transfixed him. The young gentleman asked Dean and Kano to take the little miss to rinse herself, and he would keep her company on the shopping trip. Little Miss inquired about the fact that hadn't they agreed to go shopping in a couple days? Alan strolled through the corridors, and the bird on his shoulder asked him if he was out of his mind, for the young mistress had barely woken up. Whereas before, her appearance was like a lifeless doll, devoid of any emotion or expression. Now you can see that her appearance expresses something much deeper and more touching, like a candle with a faint, dim flame that is about to be extinguished by a breeze. Any minute now its wax will melt away completely, leaving behind only a decayed wick. Only now, seeing her sister gradually losing her mind, realizing how dangerous it was to let go of this situation. Bird only replied that it was hard to be a caring brother, can he otherwise completely unconcerned about his own person? Alan and Amy unexpectedly bumped into two acquaintances during their walk. Now there are four of them spending leisure time together. What will happen at the sit-down when each of the characters has different thoughts on their minds? Meanwhile, in Chen, Lucian, being a caring and careful observer, asked the young man if he had lost something unforeseen. The paper crane asked if she would continue to remain silent. Chen asked to stop talking as they were bumping into a big shot. Mentor asked what was bigger than even them. Chen said that it was the famous second son and prince of Capel, no idea how much he had overheard from their conversation. Crane said that it seemed to be broken. Chen then demanded the money she had spent back, because she didn't want to buy a new communicator. Then she was told that the bosses unexpectedly at the last minute decided to give her a couple of days of vacation, so she can have fun there. Chen asked what about the monster bird, to which she was told that they would send someone to get her and disconnected. Chen tried to dial them again, but the dialed number is temporarily unavailable. She should try calling back later. The prince even got curious. She poked him. The prince asked about that crane being a communication technology with Huayue. He came up so unexpectedly that it startled her. Amy asked her brother about who would be walking around the evening market at this hour. Alan asked her to take it as an attempt to make amends since they hadn't gone out last time. He apologized for his willfulness. At an unexpected moment, Lucian appeared, accompanied by Chen, and initiated greetings, noting that it had been a long time since they had met. Alan, responding to his older brother's greeting, joined the meeting, saluting him in return. Lucian Capel contributed additional details by telling that he met the little girl from Huayue, emphasizing his own role in the story as the main character. His story added mystery and interest to what was going on around him, and also raised questions about what other storylines might await those involved in the events. In response to Chen Qiuyi's greeting, the protagonist expressed interest in her well-being, showing concern and consideration for the other participants in the conversation. Amy Melvin, the main villain, replied that she was fine and thanked her for her concern. She took back her hand. Alan Melvin, the villainess's twin brother, didn't understand why she didn't want to hold hands anymore. Yes, a whole exclusive squad of child protagonists, a diagram of the characters' relationships. But the plot of the story didn't start to unfold normally that they met. I don't care. You can't undo what you've done. Too many things have already happened that aren't in the original, and she keeps remembering the origins. After a while, Lucian said he'd gotten the castle card. He'd gotten lucky. A special card. Alan said he got the spike card, and Amy got the noon card. There was a mysterious atmosphere in the air surrounding the young lady, and she could hardly understand the reason why they decided to spend time playing cards in a cozy cafe. This unusual choice of occupation made her somewhat perplexed and curious as to what such actions might hint at this moment. As Chen watched the prince intently, she wondered if this gambling activity was part of Lucian's scheme. There was something mysterious in her speculation, and she felt that there might be ulterior motives behind this choice of entertainment, especially while she was focused on the game itself. Looking at the situation of playing cards in the cafe was perceived by the girls as a bad time for excitement and fun. They felt that the atmosphere was not conducive to gambling, and perhaps their mood did not match the time they were spending. At the same time, Alan, convinced that time spent in the company of peers was sure to bring joy and fulfillment to the young lady, saw the activity as an opportunity to lift her spirits and evoke positive emotions. His thoughts were directed to the welfare and happiness of his younger sister, and he believed that such leisure time would be pleasant and cheerful for her. Lucian wished to divorce himself because he had been engaged in research and development for ages that he could hardly rest. At least now he could have fun with the guys. For the boys, the scene was more than just a moment. It was a kaleidoscope of rapturous emotions and impressions. Sparks of excitement flickered in their eyes, and their faces bloomed with broad smiles expressing their complete enjoyment of the scene. The prince said that he had heard about Huayue's communicating cranes for a long time, but he had just seen it in person. He was truly amazed at the sheer distance at which speech was transmitted. Chen replied that they only have a couple of tricks of their own, and in addition, they also have a similar mechanism, only crystal. Luqian explained that even with the ability to transmit an image, that crystal was expensive to create, consumed energy quickly, and was limited by distance. He was the inventor of the communication crystal. Chen, who was the inventor of origami communication, informed that she was an ordinary citizen and didn't know about scientific stuff. She asked, why don't they ask knowledgeable people about it? All the while, Alan was trying to explain the rules to his sister. Amy watched the two of them and didn't understand how they even had time to debate with the cards. The kids here were truly scary, proving to each other who was boss. The prince said that she was a real humble girl, a mid-level executive of the inspection bureau. Or should I call her the junior head of the Huiyu trade union? Now this already represented a really exciting situation.